Behind me, this dilapidated building holds a special place in history. We're at 4300 South Saginaw Street in Flint, Michigan. This is all that's left of one of GM's largest manufacturing facilities. During the 1930s, GM was the largest privately owned employer in the world. So almost 87 years ago today, the workers took a stand against General Motors and corporate America. It wasn't easy. They had to literally fight for their wages. And in today's video, we're going to cover some of that.
It began on a cold day, December 30th, 1936. You see, GM had spent millions to pay spies within the factory, and management knew the workers were organizing. Then president of GM, Alfred P. Sloan, did not want to deal with or recognize the union. What made Fisher Body 1 strategically important to both the new union and GM's management is the fact that GM only had 2 sets of dies for their car bodies. On that morning, the plant workers noticed some of the dies were being moved, and they knew they had to act fast. UAW lead organizer Bob Travis quickly called a lunchtime meeting at the Union Hall across the street from the plant. The UAW leaders and members knew the traditional methods of picketing outside the plant wouldn't be enough. The only way the UAW members could make a real difference was to occupy the plant itself. The sit-down strike began. Remaining inside the plant meant the workers were, for the most part, protected from violence, harsh Michigan weather, and also from the threat of being replaced by non-union workers. Within the plant during the strike, workers organized into groups to take care of mail, cleanliness, entertainment, and even set up a kangaroo court, which handled penalties and grievances. Eventually, GM execs had the heat turned off in 18-degree Michigan weather. In an attempt to freeze the workers out, the UAW workers stood fast. Cutting the heat didn't work. GM execs encouraged the police and union busters to lock the doors and prevent food delivery provided by the diner across the street. UAW members, lowered down by ropes from the roof, broke the locks off the doors. Soon more police arrived and began to fire tear gas at the strikers. Victor Ruther, a UAW leader with access to a loudspeaker, shouted for the men to defend themselves with everything they had. Bottles, fire hoses, stones, 2-pound car door hinges drove the police back. The police tried to gain entry to the plant, and each time they were pushed back. On their final retreat, the police drew their pistols and fired on the strikers, injuring 13. This became known as the Battle of the Running Bulls. After the melee, Michigan Governor Frank Murphy called in the National Guard. To the surprise of many, the National Guard protected the workers from the Union busters and the police. At the time, Vice President of the United States, John Nance Garner, supported a federal intervention to break up the strike, but this idea was firmly rejected by the President Franklin Roosevelt, who encouraged the UAW and General Motors to negotiate. GM went to court to obtain an injunction against the strike. That injunction was granted by Judge Edward S. Black, but as it turns out, Judge Black owned over 3,000 shares of GM stock. When the UAW made this information public, Judge Black was quickly disbarred from the case. The UAW not only ignored this injunction, but spread the strike to Chevrolet plant number 4. You see, the UAW knew that GM had spies within the workers, so they began to set up a strike at another plant and then quickly changed to Chevrolet plant number 4 and caught General Motors completely off guard. After 44 days, they began to negotiate. The agreement that GM consented to was to rehire workers that were part of the strike, allow workers to wear buttons and other symbols that represented unions, and granted 6 months of negotiations in the plants that participated in the strike. As short as this agreement was, it gave the UAW instant legitimacy. The workers there also got a 5% increase in pay and were allowed to talk about the union during lunch. The UAW capitalized on that opportunity, signing up 100,000 GM employees and building the union's strength through grievance strikes at GM plants throughout the country. In the next year, UAW membership grew from 30,000 to 500,000 members. Employees of other car manufacturers such as Ford joined, as the entire industry was rapidly unionized. The sit-down strike projected a principal weapon of mass organization in the labor industry, projecting nearly 5,000 strikes to come within the next year. Giving labor workers newfound unionization regardless of race, education status, creating opportunities for membership agreements, payroll negotiation, and even government protection for workers. The sit-down strike provoked a newfound impact in the labor industry, giving the workers a newfound confidence to join unions and use their voice. The GM sit-down strike of 1936 to 37 was all in all the most significant American labor conflict in the 20th century.